All right, well, thank you everyone for coming to Upfront's first nutritional presentation. The goal of today is going to be just a kind of general overview of nutrition, basic ABCs, assuming that everyone knows nothing or very, very little. Okay, so we're going to go over a bit of theory work, then we're going to take that theory and how do you actually practically apply it to get to the goals that you're perhaps trying to reach. Cool? So, yeah, that's how we're going to go about doing it. Okay, so we're going to start off with the theory, laying the foundation so that you guys understand the broad base and how all the basics build into what we're actually trying to work towards. So just like building a ziggurat, funny little editing there. So what we're going to go through is we're going to be defining good nutrition. Then we're going to be looking at what is food. Then the underlying big issue for everyone, myself included, the core issue, lifestyle and resistance to change. Change is very difficult. Then we're going to have a look at the role of macros and micronutrients, and very, very quickly at water. Recommendations of daily intakes, we're going to go quick through that. Energy balance terms, which will be very helpful going forward. And again, this is just a general overview. So some of the slides like the RDIs, recommended daily intakes, we're going to go through those quite quickly. There's a good chunk of this presentation in the PowerPoint that there are slides there that are designed for you to go back over in your own time. So after today, I'm going to upload it to a Google Drive or something and you guys can look at it at your leisure. Because there's quite a few slides in here I just do not have time to go over in detail, but will still be helpful to you depending on what your goals are. So you kind of revisit the information whenever you want. And then send me a Facebook message for questions if you want. All right, so let's start by defining good nutrition. So we're all interested in having a better diet, better nutrition for our health, but what exactly does that mean? So good nutrition can be roughly defined as routine consumption of nutrients necessary for the promotion of health and growth. Very, very simple definition. So by definition, nutrition must meet our body's basic fundamental needs, not cause harm, detriment, or promote disease. Oh, the O's cut off. I suck. Okay. Align with our goals. They're the three big things it has to do. Okay, so it shouldn't be causing harm. It should meet the basic needs of the body, and then even go beyond that in some cases to meet specific goals. Right? That's where we usually are adjusting energy balance. All right. So the core issue, we're already here, addressing lifestyle and resistance to change. So lifestyle is essentially made up of our habits and weekly routines. Okay, that's what makes up our days. So that's work, rest, play, home, relationships, responsibilities. The way you want to actually live your life, that's lifestyle. And everyone, based on your personality, your environment, your natural proclivities, you're going to adjust your lifestyle, or your lifestyle is going to adjust you in various ways, because everyone's going to choose the path of least resistance. And we'll go into this a little bit more later, but essentially your lifestyle will be shaped by you just trying to adapt to the circumstances thrown at you. Okay? So like a dripping tap, these are the foundations of lifestyle-related disease. So some people think, I had a really, really big weekend with food and celebration and stuff. I've gained like 3 kilos. Very, very unlikely that one weekend's going to do that much damage. It's possible if you really went overboard, but usually it's a consistent repeat of habits. So you might have one big weekend, but that happens every fortnight, interspersed with you having 2 or 3 nights a week where you're snacking, or overindulging in takeout, or having other calorie-dense foods, or drinking too much. And it usually adds up like a dripping tap, right? Individual moments don't count, but it weighs up over time. So that's what makes up our lifestyle. So the big thing we need to do is we need to break that cycle in key areas, and everyone's a little bit different. So if change is not made and it is not sustainable, that's the big one. You won't get results. So a lot of people, and I've battled this with plenty of people, is they'll take the shortcut. They'll do the man shake, for example, to lose a lot of weight quickly. Now, while that has its benefits, and for some people I will say, by all means, use a meal replacement shake, it's usually not something that you're going to be able to do in the long term. It's not sustainable. So if you're able to use it as a tool in the short term, fine. But if you don't have the skills to learn how to work long term after that period has ended, you usually rebound. And the studies have shown us people rebound, particularly with weight loss and then gain, they rebound harder and they rebound worse than where they started. So consistency is what's more important. All right, so why is change so difficult? So we are stuck in our ways because our ways have usually formed out of a felt need or want. So like I said before, women in particular are quite interesting because they go through quite obvious moments of change throughout their life. When you finish high school and move into university or move into the workforce, life changes a lot. Usually not with your parents anymore, you're far more independent. So obesity or overweight rates tend to spike for women at that time. They also spike again when they start having children for obvious reasons. You are losing a lot of sleep, and that is correlated with weight gain. You will have a lot more perhaps calorie-dense foods. You miss a few hours of eating because I've seen this with my wife. You miss a few hours of eating because you're trying to deal with the kid. And it's like, I'm just hungry. I'm just going to grab whatever I can have. And over time, that may not be the best quality food, and that can lead to weight gain. Then women hit the middle age, mid to late 40s. That's another time where menopause and other hormonal things are happening, and just changes in lifestyle. And there's another peak of weight gain for them. Men have their own issues, but women in particular is a good example because we all know of these phases of life that women in particular will usually go through. So that's an example of how lifestyle forces you to behave in certain ways. You don't even realize the changes you're making until it's too late. So my job is to try and help stem that. Behavior does not exist in isolation. Environment is huge. We just talked about that. And one of the really interesting, from a psychological and even physiological perspectives with change is another form of stress. There are some camps about, do we have an unlimited supply of willpower, or is willpower like a finite resource? I haven't made up my mind on that discussion yet, but it seems, at least for some people, willpower is a finite resource. And when you first try and make change, a common one for a lot of people here who are clients is meal prep. That's a real big pain in the neck when you first start doing it. Usually because a lot of young people struggle with cooking in general. Once those skills improve, suddenly meal prep, thinking ahead, planning out your food, getting in control of at least one meal, if it's lunch, for example, those calories, much, much easier. Who's found that over time that, once you do a few weeks of meal prep, it just gets easier? Cool, three hands, wonderful. So because it takes effort, that can be another stress and quite draining. So sometimes you have to bite off smaller chunks and work at that until you go for the big fish, which might be weight loss or something else. All right, so here's a common example of resistance to change, and I do mention meal prep. So someone's routine or lifestyle creates a caloric surplus. That means they're gaining weight. My recommendation might be, let's look at meal prep to avoid calorie-dense foods at lunches. So this person hypothetically overeats at lunches. They go out with their colleagues, they get a kebab every day, chips. It's not very nutritious and it's very calorie-dense. I'm getting one look from on you, Paul. So my recommendation would be, let's do some meal prep so you're in control of the food you're taking to work. This is very, very common. The individual intentionally avoids meal prep because of the required energy. Like, it's a Sunday, they're like, it's a Sunday, I'm not doing meal prep. Because the first few weeks to do it might even take 2 hours. It's time consuming, it's difficult, you're tired, so you don't do your meal prep. What happens? They got nothing prepared, and so instead, some people go, all right, I'll just skip lunch, because then I'll just skip those calories in general. So then what happens? They come home and they're starving, so they just dive into their kid's packet of chips, which several people have told me that they do, because it's just something quick and easy. Then they're still hungry at dinner time, and they overeat at dinner. Then there's guilt associated. Guilt leads to less self-efficacy. Less self-efficacy means they're less likely to make changes, and the cycle continues. So that's a positive feedback loop that continues to keep someone in a habit that's going to cause them to get worse and worse. So what I try and do is help people to make a change. This is the exact same slide, except step 3, they've actually put the effort in just for 3 days. They've made something, they've prepped their lunches for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they've taken that, and they've realized, I actually feel a lot better having these lunches. I feel like I've achieved something. I'm not hungry till dinner time, which is appropriate because I'm having more protein and less processed food. They're satiated till dinner time. They're able to eat moderately in the evening because they've had more control over their food earlier in the day. 1 week of success, they're feeling satisfied. So now they're motivated. Next week, I want to try and do 4 days or 5 days. Suddenly, these repeated habits build on each other. And then they're like, I'm ready to try some new habits. So they start doing some new changes, and the little interventions that I'm providing for them add up. And that leads to big sustainable change over time. And now, because of the change they've made over time, we're now in a routine where we're in a caloric deficit, and we can try some other change. So just interrupting the cycle. And some people might not be ready to start with meal prep. It might just be your cooking sucks. You need to try and spend a bit of time upskilling your ability in the kitchen, right? All right. So then what even is food? Influences and contributing factors. We'll go quick here. Okay, so food. Let's have a look at what contributes to food. It's not just fuel. It's not just energy. It is, the body views it as just energy and what it's going to do for the body. But social bonding, It can be habit, like sitting in front of the TV and eating your favorite packet of chips. Every time I go to the movies, which is super rare, but I will always go to Woolies first and get some packet of chocolate, some packet of chips, and like a 3-liter bottle of water, and then I pee twice during the movie. But that's like my cinema routine. You know, sometimes it's for fun. I like watching Marco Pierre White on YouTube with these really simple cooking videos. I will watch sometimes 5 cooking videos in a row just for fun, and then I'm so hungry by the end of it, I go and make something creative. And yeah, for some big boys and big athletes, it is just fuel. But you can see how there are lots of factors that influence and contribute to why we eat. Christmas is a good example, right? You all have different family and cultural practices. All right, so now we need to look at, okay, well, what is the role of these different foods? How do we break food up? So we break food up into a couple of categories. First one is macronutrients. They're the nutrients that primarily give fuel and energy. So there are 3 things there. There's protein. Think of protein as the building blocks. That's what's going to help replenish and regenerate and create new tissue. Fats. Fats are really important. Fats and carbs often get demonized, but they both play very important roles in the body. Fats are essential for living. Carbs technically aren't, but fats are essential for living. Hormone regulation, cell function, they provide energy. They're important for nutrient transport and absorption, which when we look at micronutrients quickly, you'll see why. Carbohydrates is the body's primary energy source, also assists with muscle gain. If you're in a caloric surplus, it helps create an environment where you're able to perform better in the gym, you've got more energy, and helps contribute to preventing muscle atrophy. So then we got micronutrients. Micronutrients are essentially the nutrients that are there for health and function. So vitamins and minerals are the 2 things we break up into micronutrients. So we have water-soluble micronutrients, water-soluble vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins. So there are only some vitamins that will dissolve in and bond with fat molecules to cross cell membranes and perform other duties. So you need a certain amount of fat in order for them to do their job. And then we've got water, and I don't really need to go into water. You all know you need water to live. Here are some basic recommendations. 2.6 litres for men. Forgot to put the L here, but obviously 2.1 litres for women. If you exercise regularly, you have a physical job, it's hot, all those things increase your demand for water. Pretty simple, okay? You can review this slide whenever you want. All right, so recommend daily intakes. These are all from the eatforhealth.gov.au website. I'm not going to be going through this now because we need to save time for the big stuff later. So if you want to come back and look at these slides, it tells you the recommended servings for fruit and veggies depending on your age and gender. Then it gives you an example of what a serving size is. Pardon me, so you have an idea of what you should be aiming for. Fruits, same. All right, energy balance and body composition. Now we're getting into the meat potatoes. We've laid the foundation of what is nutrition, what is food, macro and micronutrients. Now how do we actually use them to our advantage? Important terms, calorie or kilojoule. That's essentially a unit of energy that the body, that we use for the body. So kilos and grams, unit of weight, kilometers per hour is a unit of speed. This is just a unit of energy for the body. Kilojoule is more what Aussies tend to use, or Australia tends to use. I have found myself agreeing with the Yanks in this case, and I much prefer using the calorie. There's smaller numbers. I find them much easier to use. So I will be using calories. You can use whatever the hell you want. But if you want me reviewing your stuff, you need to have it in calories or my brain will hurt. All right, so that's an important first term. The next one is BMR. That's basal metabolic rate. Your basal metabolic rate is how much energy your body uses every day just to live. You wake up, you lay in bed for 16 hours, you go back to sleep. That's the energy your body needs just to function. BMR. NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You don't need to really remember what that is. That's all of the activities in your day that aren't specifically exercise that burn energy. So if you have a kind of physical job, it's not technically intentional exercise, it's just doing what you do. Mowing the lawn, doing the dishes, chasing the kids, general stuff that uses energy, that's NEAT, right? Then, of course, you've got intentional activity, exercise activity that adds on to that. Then we have the important term, this is the big one to note, TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. So that takes into account your BMR plus your NEAT plus any activity and exercise that you do. Okay, so that's important. You could have twins, identical, same makeup. One of them has a intensive laboring job. The other one has an IT job. One of them is going to have a higher TDEE, assuming all other variables are the same. Their BMR might be the same, but this number is different because one of them is using a lot more throughout the day. That's why TDEE is important to understand. So, forgot I put that in there actually. So caloric surplus is an intake greater than TDEE. So if you're in a caloric surplus, you're consuming more energy than you're spending per day. Taking in more energy causes weight gain. Okay, so that's generally a netty no-no. You don't want to be taking in more than you're having, more than you're spending. A caloric deficit intake is less than TDEE, so you're in a net deficit, you end up losing weight. And isocaloric just means equal intake versus expenditure. Make sense to everyone? Good. They're important terms to understand as we go forward. Okay, now we're getting to the practical stuff. It's only taking me 17 minutes. Yes, very good. All right, so that's the theory base. Drink of water. Okay, before we go ahead, does anyone have any questions on the theory stuff? I'm kicking ass, or you're keen to get out of here? Either way, we're moving on. All right, so goal setting has to come first. You have to establish a plan, a reason why you're trying to manipulate your body composition or use the information we've just gone over for a particular reason. You have to figure out what's the desired outcome. We're going to have a look at self-awareness, behaviors, routine. We're going to talk about tracking, quantifying intake, why, how, and common barriers. And then we're going to look at managing weight and the execution of how you do that. We're going to go through a pretty detailed, the more detailed way of doing that today. And then we're going to quickly look at troubleshooting when things go wrong, because things are going to go wrong. They're not going to go the way you want. You need to know how to work around that when it happens. All right, goal setting. So this is a common one. Is this a goal you actually want? So sometimes people come to training, they're more interested in impressing me than actually doing their own thing. And so they'll tell me goals that they think I want to hear. At the end of the day, it's about you. So if you're telling me a goal, you're like, I want to achieve this thing, but in the back of your head, you're kind of like, You'd rather, it's more of a case of, I want to achieve this goal. I want to lose weight, but not really, because I really can't be bothered making the changes I need to. But I realize I should, so I kind of want to lose weight. At least be clear with that, because then we know where we're starting from. If you tell me you want to lose weight, and I'm like, here are the ABCs, you might not be ready for any of those steps. If you want to lose weight, then we go about things in a different way. So just be honest with where your goals are, where your mindset is at. Know your current limits. So again, with goal setting, it's easy to bite off more than you can chew. So if I give you an intervention like, okay, I want you to start tracking calories, which is kind of a middle ground, that can be way too much for some people to start with, tracking. It can be way too easy for some people, and you can throw more at them. But know your limits. If you're like, I understand the need for tracking, but it's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. We need to know those limits so we can try something else. But at the same time, test your current limits. We want to start off slow, but just like progressive overload in the gym, we want to be progressively making steps forward in our behaviors and in our goals and moving forward there. Nice Bruce Lee quote, be like water. So failures, some people are like myself are often, you're on or you're off. As soon as there's a failure, like you've had pizza for lunch, you go, this day's ruined, screw it, I'm having the cheesecake for dinner as well, and everything goes out the window. My recommendation to myself, I have to preach this to myself, but a failure is not a dead end. Be like water. I learned to bend around that and either shift your paradigm a little or figure out a way to break through it. So an example might be you're struggling with your weight loss because dinners are always quick and easier. I kind of went over this before because of stress and time constraints. So instead of focusing on tracking and doing a strict weight loss period at this stage, what might be better is you just focus on getting your dinners right for a few weeks. With your spouse, for example, you're like, okay, let's plan out our dinners and try and get better at managing this meal of the day. Then once that's under control, I'll actually start being a bit more regimented with things. But if you're trying to track and do a cut and there's one or two meals of the day that's always just who knows what's going to happen, that makes it very, very hard and very discouraging. And some of these examples are directly ripped off from clients, but I chose examples that apply to at least 4 or more people in this room. So if you're like, oh, he's talking about me, there's definitely at least 2 or 3 other people in the room I'm talking about. Self-awareness with food is the next step. You don't know how to change or what to change if you're not even self-aware enough to do it. So anyone I've trained in the gym, and say you're doing a squat and your knees keep buckling in, and I'm like, can you feel what your knees doing? You go, no, my knees feel fine. You're not going to be able to open your knees and fix that position unless you're actually self-aware of that happening. So a lot of the time when I'm coaching, I'll draw your attention to something that you're doing, make sure you're aware of it before we even start fixing it. So behaviors, question why and what you're eating. So if you find that some people are like, when I have had a really stressful day at work, I notice that I break open the chocolate biscuits. I never really thought of about that before, but that's what I do. I don't really care at the start if you keep doing it, but at least be aware of these are behaviors that I have. When I'm at work and I go into the tea room and someone's brought in slice, I'm like, ooh, I don't even realize how often I snack at that or whatever it is. Routine. Does your current routine force you to eat in such a way that conflicts with your goals? We talked about people with chaotic timetables and not managed dinners and stuff. So at least at the start, you don't have to make any changes yet, but have a look at your routine and go, okay, here are the black spots. Here are the issues. Then after we've gone through all the theory stuff before, have a think about, especially if you go home and look at the RDIs and think about particularly veggie intake, it's a big one. Is the food you're eating meeting your nutritional needs? Sometimes it might be prudent to take a step back and go, all right, I'm wanting to gain some weight for the gym, but I'm going to take a pause on that and not worry about trying to, get a whole lot of calories and stuff in at the moment because my nutritional quality sucks. So focus on getting the nutritional quality up before you address quantity. But then, of course, the next one is quantity. So be mindful of how much energy you're taking. So we're going to start looking at tracking and stuff. Okay, so why do we track super quick? Establishes a baseline, a good starting point. If you just track for 2 weeks, so you have an idea of your roughly caloric intake. That will already give you an idea of, oh, this is how I've been slipping into this position I don't want to be in. So it gives us a good baseline. It's very, very good at educating. A big part of the reason I get clients to track at the start, sometimes I'll say, I just want you to track for 2 weeks. 1 or 2 weeks, I don't really care what you're eating. I don't really care what your weight does. I just want you to track. Because even just doing that, some people go, I never even realized, how much crap I ate at breakfast time. I didn't realize the habits that I had. It'll start to inform your choices. Tracking requires discipline and time management, so it helps work on those skills. And it gives you confidence and control. When you can start to kind of frame in what you're eating throughout the week, you can start to analyze it and go, okay, that one little thing I can take out, that little thing I can change. And you start to feel more relaxed about the whole process because you've got more control. When you feel like your food's just everywhere, and you've got no way of figuring out what exactly you're taking in on a consistent basis, that makes it very hard to make change. All right, so how do we track? The most accurate way would be using a tracking app, digital scales, so you're actually weighing things, portioning things out. I think it's meant to be make most of, not all of your own food. Yeah, that's a great sentence. That's right. I'm reading it from an angle that's probably screwing with me. Okay, so essentially, planning ahead and having control over your food, even if it means you start eating out a little bit less, getting control over your food in the short term sets you up for the long term. A less accurate way of doing it without a tracking app stuff would be a photo diary. That sounds good in theory, but a lot of people don't do it. Photo diary would be you just take photos of everything you eat throughout the day, and then at the end, usually with your coach, you would send the images and go, this is what I ate on Monday, Tuesday. Then we have a conversation about, well, how many calories do you think was in that meal? Let's say it's a burger, and they're like, oh, I don't know, 400. I'm like, I don't know, try 700. They're like, a written diary, 48-hour recall. So I just sit down with you and go, what'd you have for breakfast yesterday? And we write it down. You don't know what your portion sizes are at that stage, but at least even with a recall, you can do it yourself. You can start to get an idea of, I really suck at getting veggies, and I really have a lot of deep fried things. So that's helpful. Tracking only protein and calories. Some people will just focus on that, and fats and carbs aren't that important. Tracking only protein. That's important for people who are more interested in just performance in the gym and their weight's not a big issue. And a less accurate way still would be reducing one or more macronutrients. This is why keto and stuff is really popular. Keto in and of itself, looking at the world who thinks it's special. Keto in and of itself is not special. It's not any more superior for weight loss or weight gain than, say, high carb, low fat. It's no more superior for your health than most other, moderate eating forms of dieting or nutritional intake. The reason keto works for people is if you remove one of the 3 macronutrients, for a lot of people, you just remove a huge chunk of your daily calorie intake. But if you indulge in a lot of meat and a lot of cheese and other things to make up those calories, you can still get fat on keto. All right, now that we're moving on from that. All right. Common barriers to tracking. Not using the tracking app properly. So someone the other day put in they had 150-gram steak for dinner. Wonderful. And then in MyFitnessPal it said that was worth about 150 calories. I'm pretty sure is wrong. 0 carb, fair enough. 0 fat, that's not right. 0 protein, that's really wrong. So this person just picked an option in the app, threw it in and went, I've done my job. And I'm like, you didn't even check, the whole point of having the meat is for the protein, and it says 0. So I've written a blog on how to use, when you get this, you can just click on that or go to upfrontfitness.com.au, go to the blogs and it's in there. A blog on how to use a tracking app properly and the kind of common mistakes people will make so you can avoid them. People will often take shortcuts. I just mentioned one where you're not actually checking what you're doing. they're inconsistent with tracking. They track one day, they miss 2, they track another day, and it still gives you some idea of their eating habits, but it doesn't give you the full picture. If you're wanting to get from A to Z quickly, more information is better if you're capable of it. Intentional and accidental misleading. Some people will have a couple of biscuits in a day, and they feel bad because I'm their source of accountability, so they just don't tell me. They tell you 3 months later that they still have that habit. But you don't realize how much those biscuits add up. So I would rather know about everything that touches your lips. And a lot of the time I'm like, that's fine, keep having your bickies for now. We'll focus on some other thing and make the changes a little bit more gentle for you. But at least just fess up. Time and effort required. We talked about that earlier on the weekends. Like, you have to put the time in when you're starting out. Simply not attempting. Some people just don't try, and I recommend everyone try tracking. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but at least try. And so on that note, that's okay. We can work around that, but as close to optimal is ideal for your sake. So yeah, that's exactly what I was just saying. They're very, very quick. Wait, can you lose weight without all this tracking numbers and steps? Yes, you can. You can. This is why keto and other things work. If you set in place principles like, I'm just going to cut carbs, and you're not too interested about gym performance, because particularly for guys and girls, but guys who are wanting to really perform well in the gym, carbs are kind of an important fuel source. But if you don't really care and you're just wanting to lose weight, you can cut the carbs, and that will likely create a calorie deficit. That's fine. You don't need to do all the tracking, but usually it's better to start really strict at the start, do the tracking, learn more about yourself, learn more about how food and everything works. And as time goes on, you can get more intuitive, more flexible, and use your instincts a bit more. But you've kind of earned that right at that stage because you know the fundamentals. If you go into that blind, it usually causes a lot of yo-yoing effects. Yeah, detailed approach, yada, yada. Okay, cool. Now we actually have some images. All right, putting it all together. This is where we're actually going to get into the meat and potatoes of how all this stuff works now. The gold medal goes to calories in, calories out. If you're not losing weight, 99% of the time, it's because you're not in a caloric deficit. Even if you have a thyroid issue and your hormones are out of whack, you can still lose weight in a caloric deficit, okay? So if you're not losing weight, I don't care what your app is telling you, I don't care what you're telling me or telling yourself, you simply have not been in a caloric deficit, okay? That's the reality of it. So that's our gold medal. Our silver medal is increased TDEE and NEAT, so do more exercise in general, generally try and be more active, get moving throughout the day, do a couple more chores and stuff at home. Being more physically mobile will burn more calories, especially if you're someone stuck at a desk job. If you're able to get up and move around more throughout the day, do that. They will all add up. Increased lean body mass. This is why at Upfront Fitness we're particularly passionate about helping people with resistance training. The more muscle you have, the more energy your body uses by default every day. So one of my big motivators for getting jacked is I can just get away with eating more food. So it's great. So if it's a weekend for me and I want to pig out a little bit, I really don't care because it really doesn't have much of an impact. So if you're able to increase lean body mass, increase your daily energy expenditure, and balance your calories, they all work very, very well at recomping your body. Now, why is Thanos? Doesn't matter about all these 3 other things. Consistency is inevitable. If you're not consistent with your intervention, your results will be inconsistent. So if anyone's going to sell that, it'll be him. All right. All right, cool. So now we're actually, this is the bit 2. If you've been switched off so far, we've got about 10 minutes left, hopefully. This is the bit to switch on. Managing weight. This can be caloric gain, weight gain, weight loss, whatever you're after. Part 1, we need to determine our starting point with calories. So how do we do that? Assuming all other variables are under control, and this is why a coach is usually helpful because there are facets to body composition that as a layperson you're not going to know. But assuming all other variables are under control, we want to establish what our maintenance calories are. So there are 2 ways to do this. An optimal way would be to weigh yourself daily for 7 to 14 days while tracking every single thing that touches your lips. Because that'll give you an idea. If you gain half a kilo in 2 weeks and you figure out what your average caloric daily intake was, from there we can figure out, okay, you were obviously in a surplus. And we can do some reverse engineering with the math there to figure out where your maintenance calories would be at, which is isocaloric, which means that would be what you would need to consume for your weight to stay static. We need to know that point so that we know whether we need to increase calories to make you gain weight. That's your goal, Joshy boy. Or if you're wanting to lose weight. I'm not singling anyone out for that one. So if you're wanting to lose weight, you go below your maintenance. Okay, if you're eating in surplus and you take off 300 calories, you might just be putting yourself at maintenance and you don't really go anywhere. The second way to do it if you want to get the ball rolling quick is you can use a TDEE calculator. So there's a link there. You can just go into the PowerPoint and click that and follow the prompts. And that'll give you an idea of a rough place where your maintenance will be. It's not exact. There is trial and error in this, unfortunately. Everyone is a little bit different. The principles of metabolism in general for mankind apply to everyone, but everyone is unique in how their body does things. So then we need to determine the rate of gain or loss that is desired. This is really quite easy. So whatever your desired loss or gain per week in grams, add 10%, and that becomes the caloric change you need to make each day. So if you want to lose 500 grams in a week, then you would take off 550 calories per day. If you're wanting to gain 200 grams per week, you would add 220 calories per day to your maintenance. And then you would test that, see how it goes, right? So it's always the grams, add 10%, that's the calorie you need to change per day. That's step one, maintenance, and figure out where we need to be at. So from there, we need to establish our macros. So we need to take our number, and we're going to go through an example of how you do this, I think, next slide. So we want to convert those calories into macronutrient amounts. So say you've got, again, we're going to go through this, but you've got 2,000 calories. You're like, that's great. How much of those calories should be fats, protein, and carbs? Okay, well, that's what we're going to do. So this is a slide for your reference. So come back to this slide to help you out. Different phases of training or for different goals, your demand for protein changes. So it's worth 4 calories per gram. If you're in a gaining phase, you're in a caloric surplus, you don't need as much protein. Anywhere from like 1.5 to 1.8, if you want to go higher, is fine. Even probably 1.3, 1.4, you'll probably be okay if you're younger, in particularly. I'll skip to this note already. The older you are, the more protein you need. You're less protein sensitive as you get older. Most people here are in the sub 30 or around 30 age bracket, so you're probably going to be towards the lower end of these ranges. The older you are, the more you want to be going towards the higher end. Where? All right, so 1.5 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilo. So let's make it nice and simple and call it 2 grams because that's really easy maths. If you were 70 kilos and you're not crazy overweight at 70 kilos, your average weight, 70 kilos, and you were having 2 grams of protein per kilo, you'd be aiming for about 140 grams of protein per day, right? These numbers get a bit screwy if you're quite overweight because these numbers more have to do with lean body mass. So if I had someone who's exceptionally overweight, I wouldn't put them on like 2 grams per kilo body weight because if they're like 130 kilos, that's 260 grams of protein per day, probably a bit of overkill. So even for an overweight person, I would err more towards the smaller side. So yeah, when you're in a deficit, you want to be having more, 1.8 to 2.5 plus, maintenance 1.6 to 2.2 plus. I usually consistently hover myself around the 2 range, 1.8, 2 range. And when I'm cutting, I'll usually go 2.2, 2.4, something like that. All right, so then fat, and I'm going to explain how we actually do the maths next slide, so I'm trying to go quick. Fat is 9 calories per gram. Okay, so it's considerably higher per gram than protein and carbs. Carbs is also 4. Regardless of the phase, I usually recommend 0.8 grams to 1 gram per kilo. This can be extended, usually in a deficit phase, to 0.5, sometimes even up to 1.5, depending on the individual for various reasons. But anywhere from like 0.6, 7 to 1, usually good range. Carbs, 4 calories per gram, and the way that we calculate how many carbs we should be having is that always equals remaining calories, because we need protein. That's essential for tissue growth, and when you're in a deficit, higher protein plus the stimulus of weight training tells your body, I want you to eat fat and keep the muscle because we're using the muscle and I'm fueling it with protein. So we want that nice and high. We need fat to live. So carbs is the more expendable one, so that just becomes whatever we have left over. Important side note, alcohol is 7 calories per gram, so it's nearly as much as fat. That's where alcohol becomes a problem. And your body also treats it as a poison, so it kind of gives you energy, but it's also kind of a pain in the ass for your body. So, I mean, have it, but don't go crazy with it because it just kind of gets in the way. So the way you would use this is, and again, next slide we'll go over it, but you do the maths, test, record, analyze your data. If things aren't going the way you want, if you continue getting results, continue doing what you're doing. If not, make some changes, plus or minus calories, make adjustments where you need to. But give it time. This is not a fast process, okay? This is a lifestyle, more of an educational thing the first few times you do it. All right, so an example. And again, you can come and view this slide whenever you want to figure out what the hell I'm saying, because I'm going to try and go quick so you all don't switch off. So let's say for easy maths, client has a maintenance at 2,300 calories per day. They're wanting to lose about 300 grams per week. 500 grams per week. Damn, I got it wrong. So we reduce their calories by roughly 500. I said 550, like 10%, but for keeping the maths easy, even 550 calorie difference isn't huge. So we'll just keep it nice and simple. 500 calories per day, we pull them down to 1,800. Does that make sense to everyone so far? Great. So how do we figure out our macros from here? They're 23 years old, 72 kilos, so they're not really overweight. They're wanting to tone up a little bit. They're 23, they're pretty young, so they're protein sensitive. So protein, 2 grams per kilo is what I'm going to put them on. So that's going to equal roughly 145 grams of protein. That's about 2 times 72. 145 grams of protein-ish per day. There is even a bit of wiggle room in there, 5-10 grams either side. Since protein is worth 4 calories, we take their grams, 145 times 4, 580. So 580 calories out of the 1,800 is allotted to protein. Easy. Fat, 0.8 grams per kilo is what we're going to put them on. So we're going to go 60 grams-ish per day. 60 times 9, 540. So another 540 of our calories are allocated to fat. Right? So we're just sticking with the ranges. We use the ranges to figure out where we need to be at, depending on the phase. So now we go 580 calories for protein plus 540 calories for fat equals 1120 calories. 1,800 minus 1120 equals 680 calories. That's left over for carbs. Nice and simple. We divide that by 4 and we get 170. That's how you get it. So underline this person 1,800 calories per day for a 500 gram deficit, 500 gram deficit, 140 grams of protein, 60 grams of fat, and 170 grams of carbs. That's what they'd be aiming for. So we tally that all up, and that's how it would look when you write it out. You got your calorie goal, you've got your protein, fat, and carb goal. For most people, particularly as a beginner, fat and carbs aren't super important. The two most important are protein. You've got to make sure that's where it needs to be, and calories. Some days you might have a higher carb day, okay, you might have a lower fat. 2 days later, much higher fat day, lower carb day. Usually that's going to be fine. Okay, they can alternate a little bit more. You've got a bit of wiggle room. You can see here I've also written plus or minus 10 grams of the protein either way. So you can go 40, 50 grams, that's fine. Plus or minus 5 for fat. Usually you want to go more than 5. And carbs plus or minus 10 as well. So nice and simple. Yeah. Okay, so then you've started doing that. Now we have to check our progress. How do we do that? Regularly check the scale weight. Either do it daily or every 2 or 3 days. So we can get averages. So even in my own, I'm doing a weight gain at the moment. I randomly had a day the other day where 3 days after I'd weighed myself, I was like 87.1. I was suddenly 88.2. And I was like, I've not gone that crazy over the last 3 days to gain a kilo and 100 grams. And then 2 days later, it dropped back down to like the low 87s. So you're going to have undulations, particularly in the first 2 weeks or so. People are like, I lost like 1.5 kilos this week. I'm like, that's mostly water. And they realize after a few weeks that things dramatically slow down. Okay. Before and after photos are really important. So I never have to see them. I really don't care. I don't really post up any photos of my clients. Most people don't really like showing their bodies off online. I couldn't care less. But take some before photos, front, side, rear, so you can see, particularly if you're like a skinny guy and you want to see muscle gain, that's always really encouraging. And same if you're an overweight person, you want to see how the shape changes. Because at the end of the day, a lot of our weight changes have to do partly for aesthetics, and to a degree, that's perfectly fine. So taking the photos, the scale weight tells one story, photos tell another, and photos are usually more motivating. Waist and hip measurements are a common one I'll use. Sometimes we'll use calipers. Not too often. I mainly deal with beginners. Calipers are kind of not necessary in that case. I want to give you the tools you can use at home. You can weigh yourself, you can do photos, you can do waist and hip measurements. In the end, you don't need me to do that. There are skills you can take the rest of your life. And like I said, expect the rate of loss to be fast in the first week or two. Now, if weight isn't moving, there are a whole bunch of slides coming up about how to troubleshoot. I'm not really going to be going into them because it's already been about 40 minutes. But 99% of the time, it's simply calories in versus calories out. If the weight has not moved for 2 weeks, there's something in your recording or something in your habit. Something is happening to cause you to be, at the very least, maintenance. At worst, you're eating too much and gaining weight. But regardless of what the numbers are telling you in your app, if you're not losing weight, you're not in a caloric deficit. Metabolic adaptation. Quite simply, metabolic adaptation is the body is always trying to bring you back to homeostasis. So studies have shown that when you are in a deficit, your body will actually start to be less active. You get a little bit more lethargic, you get a little bit lazier, you don't move around as much. So now your body is going, oh, you're eating less? That's cool. I'll just do less. Now you're back at maintenance. So creating habits and routines, like every morning I'm going to go for that walk, even if I'm feeling sluggish, that keeps the TDEE higher because you're relying on habits and routine that you've got while we have the caloric deficit, and then eventually your body gets used to that and won't fight you so much. But that helps offset those natural defense mechanisms. Your body is much prefers to store energy than it likes to spend energy. Stay calm. Assume human error as a beginner. If things aren't going the way you want, assume you're doing something wrong. It will really take the stress off if you just assume, all right, things aren't going the way I want. I'm probably doing something wrong. All right, so I'm not going to go through these because we're pretty much at the end. 45 minutes I'd like to finish, but you can look at these slides in your leisure, okay? So common barriers like hunger. I got a few tips there. Any tips you have any issues with, just message me and go, this wasn't clear. I'll talk to you anytime to help anyone out. So common barrier to weight loss, hunger, cravings, fatigue, you get tired, that makes it hard to be consistent. Metabolic adaptation, just talked about that. Inaccurate reporting. The big one, not even trying. So you actually have to try and implement some changes to have anything happen. Troubleshooting weight gain. I've been a hard gainer. I've never had an issue losing weight, sorry to say, but I have had issues gaining weight, and it's a genuine issue for some people. So you're just not getting enough calories. Metabolic adaptation for weight gain is interesting too, because your body will increase energy expenditure. You might find you're twitching more, you're just more active, and then suddenly you're eating more, now your body's spending more and you're back at maintenance. So it works the reverse way as well, which is quite interesting. Feeling sick and bloated, that's one that plagues me. Bored, I can't eat when I don't like the food. You can go through those and talk to me if you need help. So let's summarize everything we've gone over, because there's been a lot. Very, very simple. Number one, understand what good nutrition is. The Eat for Health website is quite good. You can have a look at it used to be the food pyramid, now it's a food pie chart. It's a good place to start to give you an idea of where your balance of calories should be at. Begin tracking, keeping a log of some kind. Even if you're just writing it down, you're doing a photo diary of tracking, and an app is too hard to start with. Start somewhere. Think ahead, consider your food options. I always encourage my clients who like to eat out a lot. I'm like, just consider your other options. Instead of going for the pizza when you go out, maybe have the steak and veg, because that's definitely going to be less calorically dense than the pizza. Allocate room. If you've got a big event coming up, have smaller meals. Maybe do an intermittent fasting day where you do skip breakfast, have a small lunch, and then you've got more freedom in the evening. Like, that's a strategy that can work. Test and repeat. Think of this process when you first try it as like doing a course. It's a learning experience the first time. Probably not going to get great results the first time. Okay, so accept that and just practice. It will get easier as you go on. Several people here have already experienced that, I'm sure. And the last one is be consistent, as Thanos says, because it is inevitable. Keep at it. You've got a long journey ahead of you. The focus point should be the process, not the results. The results will come over time. Focus on the process. And Ash, who isn't here today, but she's a good example of why you focus on the process. So Ash is a female client of mine. She had a chat with a friend recently. He was like, wow, you're looking great. Have you been into fitness and stuff lately? And she shared with me some screenshots of the conversation because she's quite chuffed with herself and quite proud. And so these are some quotes which I took a lot of pride out of. Ash has lost quite a lot of weight in the last kind of 10 months, never really trying a serious cutting phase. She just took on board really the habits and the routine ideas more than anything, and the weight just came off. She wasn't too interested with performance necessarily. She just wanted to be consistent with it. This is what happened. But more than that, I was more proud of these answers. She said, my motivation can go up and down, but once you establish a routine, it works better. Yes, it does. If I mentally plan to go to the gym, so she sets it aside and makes these non-negotiable. She's just like, I go and I do it. Different types of exercises. We mix things up for her to keep her interested. Big one for her, keeping track of my workouts and numbers so she can look back and go, oh, look, I've made progress. And that motivates her to go, okay, this week I'm going to try a little bit harder. If you've ever gone to the gym before without a plan, you just kind of go off feel, and you, after a couple of weeks, probably find yourself really not going anywhere. So she can see progress. So, a trainer is a guide and a teacher. At Upfront Fitness, we prioritize education and independence of our clients. Think of your time with us as like a course. I rant on a bit there. The uniqueness of the trainer is that they will cater all these aspects to your individual needs. And this is really the important bit, Especially the couples here that I've trained, or people that are in groups, you'll hear how I do have to do things differently for different people. Because while the foundational principles are the same, our physiology, as I said before, is the same person to person, the individual responses and variability can drastically impact results. So a trainer is really helpful because my job is to help quickly figure out what the individual needs and work through problems much faster than you'd be able to figure it out by yourself. Final tip, if the diet has a name, ask lots of questions. Any questions? Any questions after that? Yo. That's fat. Yeah. 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 So when you're selecting, and this is why reading the blog that I was talking about is really helpful, because it will talk about making sure you're picking the right options. Sometimes I'll encourage people, like if you use MyFitnessPal and type in beef steak, it'll come up with like 400 options, and half of them are crap. So it might be worth going into like Google and typing in rump steak, because different cuts of meat slightly different. But you say rump steak nutrition, and it will say per 100 grams, something like 27. Again, it depends on the cut. 27 grams of protein per 100 grams, 10 grams of fat, something like that. And then you find the option in the app that's the closest to what Google's telling you. You pick that one, and it will automatically say for you X amount of protein, X amount of fat, and that's how you would factor that in. That's why I like using the apps, because all the information's in there. You just need to learn how to work around the crap areas of it. Any other questions? Yo, James. Off the top of my head, I don't know the number off the top of my head. There are recommendations like RDIs for all that stuff. To find that out, I would just jump on Google and look at what the Australian guidelines are for that, or even the World Health Organization guidelines are for that. If you're a serious athlete or high blood pressure and stuff, your sodium needs change. Everyone's a little bit different. Generally, I don't stress too much about someone's sodium intake. You can kind of tell from what they're tracking in their app whether they're having too much or not. But yeah, if you want to find out a specific range, you can look that up. And when you're using an app like MyFitnessPal, it'll kind of gauge for you the sodium intake. But it's not super high up on my stress levels. If you're having a good amount of salt, but you're also a really, really big water drinker, kidneys are usually pretty happy with that anyway. So, yeah, any other questions after all that? Yes, Michael? Yeah, that's fine. The issue that people generally have with Coke, like Coke Zero and stuff, with the artificial sweeteners and stuff in it. A lot of debate out about those. My opinion on them at the moment is artificial sweeteners in moderation, like anything, really aren't a problem. If you've got that craving for something sweet and you have the Coke Zero, it's like once every couple of days or whatever. Even if it was once a day, I wouldn't be too stressed. Have the Coke Zero and suddenly like, well, my sweet tooth is satisfied. It's worth virtually no calories. The rest of your nutritional intake of the day is pretty spot on. For an average weighted, healthy individual, I don't see it having any detrimental impact on you. So, yeah. So far, things like aspartame and other artificial sweeteners have not been proven to cause cancer or do anything negative, so I'm not too worried. Anyone else? Excellent. Okay, did everyone get something out of that? Was that helpful for everyone? Is anyone regretting coming? Good. Okay, thank you very much for coming. Hope you got a lot out of it. We will now reset the gym, and anyone who wants to lift things for the lols, you may lift things for the lols. All right, thank you very much.